save money. Okay, we're back here we were talking about Erickson, Freud and Erickson. Let me say about Freud, just to make a few more statements about Freud, because I think it's important to understand that for Freud and Erickson in some way are the parallels of Skinner and Bandura. In some ways, at least initially when Erickson's theory came out. Skinner talks about person to person, one to one, you and the person with you. In Freud's case, almost completely your parents, right? Speaking of the Oedipal stage. And that's what determines your personality. Erickson is going to go out and say no, just the way Bandura said to Skinner. Bandura says to Skinner, no, social forces influence personality too. Learning from your society influence learning. Social forces influence learning. Erickson is going to tell Freud social forces influence personality. You have to understand that Freud has a deeply, quote-unquote, was that not clear? You want me to say it again? You want me to see what slide we're on. You're looking for, say it again?
To see what slide we're on.
Oh, we're not on any slide. I'm just shooting the breeze here, okay? So, in other words,
can you say
just
that again?
When it came to learning, Skinner said one-on-one, and Bandura said no. There's social learning. When it came to personality formation, Freud said it's basically one-on-one, parents and child, and Erickson said no. Society makes a difference, and the social influences on you expand as you get older. So what Freud called, well, it's the latency period, it doesn't matter too much, right? You're in school, and I know there are people around, but your personality is pretty much set during the Oedipal stage. Erickson said, no, that's not true. Okay, I'm going to say it up front once again, and then I'll say it once again later. One of the interesting things that we notice about the psychologies that flourished in the beginning of the 20th century is that they sort of ended development, particularly Piaget and Freud, at adolescence, right? Formal operational reasoning comes in around adolescence. The genital stage comes in around adolescence. And that's it. And it stayed that way for a long time among people who were interested in stages of development until Erickson came along. And Erickson gave us the idea of adult development. Okay, that development continued, that people in their 30s were different from people in their 60s, who in turn were different from people in their 80s, if you will. And most of the terminology that you hear regarding problems that adults have their roots in Erickson. Empty nest syndrome, midlife crisis, all of that has its roots in Erickson, the idea that development continues beyond adolescence. Okay, now let me say something else that I hinted at the last minute or two last time, was that Freud's theory tends to be viewed as deeply pessimistic. Remember, the ego develops out of bitter necessity. The superego develops out of fear of parents for boys, and for girls out of a feeling of deep inadequacy, right? The inadequacy being penis envy, and therefore identifying with the father. And basically, so we're id creatures, full of anxieties, full of frustrations. The first frustration, necessary frustration. Even if in theory you could have no frustrations during the oral stage, at the anal stage, you're necessarily going to be frustrated by the fact that people are demanding toilet training and you can't do whatever you want, wherever you want, whenever you want. And it's seen as a pessimistic theory. Okay? Freud was considered sort of dead for a long time. He's making a comeback. You're not supposed to I'm not supposed to date these lectures, but this week's Newsweek of the semester, this was being broadcast in 2005 in the spring, of the semester in which I'm broadcasting this, the front page of Newsweek has Freud is not dead. Okay, things are coming back. Okay, so, and his theory furthermore is the springboard for most subsequent theories of personality development. Either expanding it and eventually moving off in one's own direction, as Erickson did, vehemently rejecting it, the way Maslow did, but he says out and out, I reject. He called his psychology the third way. There's Freud, and there's Skinner, and I have a third way. Now, he came along before Bandura and others, so, okay. Adler's psychology, which we don't have time to go into in this class, rejecting Freud, saying the ego is more important than Freud said. The ego is not just reactive, it's active. Jungian stuff is all over the place, talking about developing Freud's idea of the id and saying it's much more expansive than Freud said. So it's important to remember that he's sort of the father of this whole business of personality psychology, and to this day you will find people, many modern therapies, either saying I'm neo-Freudian or being ferociously anti-Freudian. He still sits as kind of the giant. All right, a lot of people don't agree with that, as Freud's old stuff. And in a way, he's a giant because many of the ideas that we that we take for granted come from Freud. Much of it because he was a doctor. For instance, the Hippocratic Oath. Most of you know about the Hippocratic Oath, right? The oath that doctors take, that Hippocrates, the first doctor, gave. You know about that? That's the oath that physicians have to take. It's called the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm, etc. Hippocrates was he wrote this oath about what a physician should do. And he talks about symptom treatment. Okay? Medicine for thousands of years was symptom treatment. Person comes into you with a runny nose and a sore throat and a fever and watery eyes. You treat each symptom one by one. The idea that all of those are the underlying cause of all those is one thing, let's say a bacterial infection, that's called, let's go to the overhead things. It's still called an overhead, the tablet. It's called a syndrome, right? The syndrome for bacterial infection, or a staphylococcus and a streptococcus infection is all of that, and a sore throat and a fever, etc. The idea that many different symptoms can come from one underlying cause. Before Freud, okay, come back to me if you can. Before Freud, there was this idea in psychology that we treated every little symptom that you have. Interestingly enough, that's Skinner's approach. Let's treat your behaviors one by one. Before Freud, there was no sense. Okay, he's the one who said no. The fact that a person is super organized and has this compulsion to come on time and is very intolerant of people who are disorganized and can't take surprises in life and can't go with the flow, that's all of those are sign of one underlying, right, anal compulsive tendencies. Okay? So he brought syndrome to psychology. Freud also brought the idea that previous experience, childhood experiences, influence what we do. To this day, Skinner also rejected that, saying, I don't care about your past, let's just get what's going on today. To this day, things like reality therapy are bitterly critical of Freud in that respect. They say, look, I don't care about that. Let's start from here and go forward. But in my opinion, it's not so easy. Okay? It is rare to find a person, today's a she day, but I'm going to use both, in her or his 60s or 70s who doesn't have some latent angers about what happened when that person was in school with a given teacher or given somebody. I still remember the teacher who didn't like me. Of all my high school teachers, she's one of the fewest names I remember. I was put into the advanced biology class, and she didn't want me there. And she went, and I was carefully making this slide. She says, what's taking you so long? She slapped together, said, here, put on the microphone and look. Then she came back at the end of the period and said, look how sloppy your slide is. It's one she had made, right? I still remember that to this day, right? I'm still angry with her about that. I was 15? Over 45 years ago. Most of you have things like that that are still in there. Wait till you, a lot of people taking this course are too young, say, well, that was 7, 8, 10 years ago, you can still have a right to be angry. But things, okay, a lot of people still have feelings, something that reminds you of a childhood experience that happened when you were 6 or 7 or 8 or 10, still brings warm feelings toward you, to you, right? The other way too, right? There are certain things about your personality. That's true for everyone who's taking this course, ever took it, ever will take it, or ever will be alive, right? You cannot explain. Right? It's very hard for you to explain. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. Okay. This is what makes me feel good. This is what doesn't make me feel good. These are the kinds of sexual activities I prefer. These are the kind of sexual activities that I don't like. There are jokes about that. I'm not going to tell them on camera, right? So these are the kinds of people with whom I prefer. These are people I don't prefer. And it's small things. There have been endless analyses of why men prefer women with short hair and long hair when it comes to, oh, that woman's pretty. Endless analyses, obviously. Can anybody figure out why there are some men who are intrigued with women with big breasts? Somebody give me a Freudian analysis. Come on, this is easy. Go ahead.
Being nursed as a child?
Nursing, oral stage. It's an oral fixation. We saw that in Look Who's Talking. You know that movie? Where there's a little baby who's talking. Bruce Willis is the voice, right? Bruce Willis is the voice of the baby, and John Travolta is the father. And a woman comes by, she has huge breasts, and Travolta looks down and says, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And the baby says, yeah, food, right? So that's, right? But that's a Freudian kind of an analysis. And Freud is also the one that told us, therefore, that everything that we look at in the environment is filtered through our own emotions. Just the way Piaget told us, everything we look at in the environment is filtered through our own thinking. There was no way to convince the child who thinks that if you pour the water in another cup, it makes it more or less. There's no way to convince that child that child is wrong. Because that child is thinking in a certain way. Likewise with you. There's no way, with emotions and with you and with your students, there's no way to convince that student that the feelings are wrong, they're erroneous. They're who the person really is. And let me emphasize again, much of your interaction with your students has to do with your own personality. Okay, I already set this up by telling you about the students you love and everyone else hates. Hates is too strong a word. The student that gets on everyone's nerves and you just are attracted to that student, and the other way around, that has to do with your personality. What's going on inside of you? What's happening to you? And I'll tell you a story that happened to me. I like students who are rebels, who are wise guys. Okay? I don't know why. Freud, if enough Freudian analysis, maybe I could find out why. And I sort of take to them, and they, right? And I usually develop a good relationship with them. And there was one student who was a wise guy, and I did my usual thing with him, etc., and he just wouldn't warm up to me. He just wouldn't, okay. It got me very upset. I'm talking about, I don't know, years ago. For many years, I taught one course in a middle school from 8 to 8:30 before I came to the university, so it was it doesn't matter. But this was, by the way, it's not a bad thing to do. If you ever get out of education, it's not a bad thing to do to keep one foot in the door. It helped shape a lot of what I talk about education, because I was really teaching kids. The kid got me very upset that he wouldn't warm up to me. He didn't have an obligation to be my friend. He didn't ask me to come and try to, be his buddy. but it was something inside of me. And you have to be careful of that. You have to try. But by this time, I knew enough Freud, so that I said, this is my problem, not his problem. I shouldn't be angry with him. If you have this overwhelming need for all your kids to be super organized, that's your problem, not their problem if they're learning the material. It's your problem, okay? If you find one kid whose habits are bothering you and whose ways of doing things are bothering you, that's your problem, not necessarily his problem. I just watched a movie, Children of a Lesser God. That's the story about the man teaching in the deaf school, right? And a kid signs him and calls him a curse word, right? And he's trying to teach the kids to talk. That's his job. So he says to him, if you're going to call me that, say it. Okay, so rather than getting furious, he uses it as a teaching opportunity. Okay? And the kid starts to say it. Okay? And he said, no, S. You can figure out the word was, right? And he showed him his mouth, and the kid said it. And from then on, the kid began talking by constantly calling, this is when they were playing basketball, constantly calling him curse words. And he made him articulate the curse words. And throughout the movie, the kid is calling him these dirty names, right? I mean, obviously, it's a love story between him and somebody else, but that's an underlying theme. So he took this, instead of getting angry with him, he was a high school kid, he's his teacher, right? So instead of getting angry with him, he used it as a learning opportunity, right? That happened to me once. Push it down, say it again.
Somebody called you names?
Yeah. The guy got mad at me, the kid got mad at me and cursed at me, and I said, this was middle school. I said, look, I've heard all those words before. So you're not going to call me anything I haven't been called 10 times. He said, let's talk about this, okay? We both lost our heads, okay? So rather than, okay, now it's easy for me to do that, I admit it. Something about my personality that I don't take those kinds of things terribly personally. Okay, you saw what I do take pride. I took something else personally, but you have to watch yourself. You have to watch what you're doing, what you're up to, and ask yourself periodically, how much of this is due to something wrong with something about the kid? How much of it is due to me? The other thing you have to remember is a kid who is, Freud will tell you, seems to be unbelievably disorganized. Nothing you can do about it. 6 M&Ms and 3 smiley faces are not going to change that much. Okay? And this is what bothers me so much about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's basically saying, look, there are certain kinds of human personalities we accept and certain kinds we don't. And if you have the kind that we don't, we're going to pump you full of drugs. When you have schools where 25%, 35%, there's some schools where 50% of the boys are being pumped full of Ritalin, something is wrong with that school. You are basically saying, if you want to get an education, you can't have this kind of personality. You have to let me pump you full of drugs until you do.
You know what they're doing now is, I believe that there's so many children coming up and saying that they, or parents claiming that the kids having ADD, they're actually limiting how many children they're allowing to be assessed in the schools now.
Exactly. I mean, look, I'll tell you what happened with this stuff. In the 1970s, there were schools in the inner city, which were mostly black kids, where 60 and 70% of the kids, of the boys anyway, were on Ritalin. And eventually the community, the black organized community, said, wait a second. You can't possibly believe that 70% of our kids are sick. You're drugging a whole generation of kids. And it stopped for a while. Right? It stopped. But then it began to make a comeback in the 80s and the 90s, and now it's back in full force, and it's painful to me, so you have to watch that. Okay. What I want to do now is talk about Erickson a little, and as I said last time, wait a minute, I got troubles here. I have troubles here. Okay. Erickson, as I said, let's go to the PowerPoint. Erickson, as I said, here he is. I don't know if I piddled with this slide. Is learned from Anna Freud, who was Freud's daughter. And unlike Freud's theory, which was a psychosexual theory, his theory, as I said last time, was a psychosocial theory. And I already explained what that means. That he talked about the environment the social environment having a profound effect on kids. And he talked about, Freud could have said the same thing, but he talked about a certain emergence of stages. The kids go through a sequence of stages. There's a predetermined sequence of stages, okay, through which we're going to develop. It's nothing that Freud didn't say, except he's going to have 3 stages over and above Freud's stages that are adult stages of development, and they emerge in accordance with a preset plan. So unlike Piaget, who says, look, you're going to have to construct these stages yourself, Erickson's going to say, no, they're biologically wired in. I already talked about that. And he said how at each stage there's a crisis. Okay, and that's where we ended last time. Let me just say once again that at each stage, you are going to have a resolution which is a negative one, a resolution that's a positive one. Each one, the resolution has to do with how the person's social environment treats the person. So if the social environment, I'm just giving the, for instance, of the first stage, if the social environment causes you to be a trusting person, shows you that the world is to be trusted, you will become a trusting person. If the social environment shows you that the world is not to be trusted, you will become a mistrusting person. You will not trust people. Once again, for every stage, the resolution is right here, right? The healthy resolution is about there, not here. We talked last time about what we call people who are overly trustworthy. We say gullible, right? A sap, a sucker. You know how Lincoln said you can fool all the people some of the time and some of the people all the time. You can't fool all the people all the time. I think it was P.T. Barnum who said, you can fool all of the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, and that's enough to make a living, right? In other words, I can always sucker somebody in, right? He once had a zoo in which he had a great egress, right? He had, right, the lion and the lioness, the tiger and the tigress, and people would pay 50 cents or 20 cents or whatever because they wouldn't leave. So finally, they had to sign the great egress. And egress means an exit, right? People would go out and they were out of there. They had to fool them to getting out of the thing. He's the one who, right? You're right. He's the one who put together all the kinds of phony, the wild man of Borneo and all that kind of stuff, right? It was just some guy who happened to have a hairy body and he pasted some hair on the guy would go around the cave, right? You know, people, you could be a sucker, right? So you have to be careful about this stuff. So, but you're basically a trusting person. A person who's over here will say, I don't trust you. A person over here will say, I don't trust anybody. But a person over here will say, I don't trust you until you give me cause to trust you. A person over here will say, I trust you until you give me cause to mistrust you. Yeah, go ahead.
So the tax test would be coming from the mentality of mistrust.
Why is that?
Because
I hope you're right. Tell me.
they're requiring proof to show that you're trustworthy, and that the proof is the results of the test.
Well, that's very interesting. Who's trustworthy? Not the students, but the
faculty.
The faculty, the teachers. They're saying, I don't trust that you're teaching the kids. I got to test the kids. There's no doubt that these tests are all anti-teacher. There's no question about that. I mean, everybody knows that. If you can't learn something, okay, he's right. If you can't learn something, how in the world is saying, okay, I'm going to test you on it, going to teach you? I cannot figure out plane geometry. Okay, I'm going to give you a test. Now I'm going to figure it out. The only rationale behind the test is to say, you don't know plane geometry because your teacher's sloughing off. We'll get the teacher, we'll put the teacher's feet to the fire. That's right. It's an ethic of mistrust of teaching. There's no question about it. Now, so let's go back to the PowerPoint. Erickson says there's a predetermined genetic plan of what constitutes a healthy personality, namely a positive resolution at each stage. So what constitutes a healthy personality is not, this is as close as I can get to red without the people who are televising screaming at me because the red looks terrible. What constitutes a healthy personality is not arbitrary or socially determined. The epigenetic principle states that there's a universal biologically determined conception of what a healthy personality is. Okay? So there are two profound statements here. Number one, this is, without Erickson's probably initially intending to do it, but this idea that there's of what constitutes a healthy personality, this is a rejection of Freud's idea that people are sick, all sick. This is saying there is a way that we can interact with people, the people with whom we come into contact, and particularly for teachers, etc., we'll see at the stage of industry versus inferiority, and etc., there's a way for people to interact with other people such that they can become healthy, to have healthy outcomes. Rather than trying to put defense mechanisms in place, as a therapist, I'm going to try to get you to get healthy resolutions. Okay, come back to me for a second. One of the problems with Freud's theory, quote unquote problems, is that it's very hard to test. So I have three people. Person A, all these three people, their mothers were vicious, cruel to them, rotten, nasty, right? Abusive to them. Person A says, I hardly remember my childhood. That's repression. Person B says, oh, I love my mother to pieces. That's reaction formation. Right? Oh, I remember what I was going to tell you about Freud. Person C says, well, my mother, I hate my mother. She never did anything. She's no good. She's rotten. She's miserable. But it turns out he's the one who had the nicest mother of the three by an objective criterion, right? So it's whatever happens, it's for, right? Whatever you have, Freud can prove that he's right. If you love your mother, you hate your mother, you feel neutral about your mother, he was right. It's a different defense mechanism. And Freud is going to tell us most of the, quote, nice things about ourselves are really sicknesses. I'll give an example. I remember what I was going to tell you last time. I was going to tell you about how Freud explained anti-Semitism. You have to remember, what Freud is going to tell you is that we really all hate our fathers. We hate our superego because we're basically id creatures. Okay, Christianity has a name for the superego. What's Christianity's name for the superego? Superego is your conscience, the right thing to do, the right way to be in the world, right? Who's Christianity's superego?
Yahweh.
What?
Yahweh.
No, well, it's much more personal than that, though.
Christ.
Say it.
Christ.
Right, Jesus is Christianity's superego. Be kind, be sweet, be loving, be decent. And boy, do anyone who is raised a Christian hate that like poison. Why? Because you don't want to do all the things Jesus told you to do. You want to go and steal and kill and murder and take what you want. But your superego is telling you, so to say, he becomes basically the father figure, right? The representative of the father figure. So all Christians hate Jesus. That's what Freud will tell you. Huh? But you cannot possibly admit that to yourself because you have overwhelming feelings of guilt. So what you do is you divert those feelings onto, that's called, I can never remember this. It's definitely a Freudian suppression. You don't repress it. You put it onto somebody else. I'll come up with a term. It'll hit me. What?
Transference?
Yeah, no, transference is taking your, it's not transference. Transference is taking one, is...
Inject.
What? No, it's I can't remember what it's called. You put that hate onto someone else. It's such a cathartic experience. It's overwhelming. You got the name? It's in the book. What is it?
I don't remember.
You don't remember. Okay. And so you put the hate, it's really bad. I can never remember from semester to semester. I can't remember. There's no doubt that it's something Freudian about it. And so he said, so what did he do? What do Christians do? He said he put the hate onto the people who produced Jesus. Right? Those were the Jews. And by the way, he grew up in a time of ferocious anti-Semitism. He was in Vienna at a time when the mayor of Vienna hated Jews. He ran on a platform of hating Jews. So he grew up in a time of ferocious anti-Semitism. So that's Freud's explanation. You want to hear about the Jews? You see, for the Jews, that same figure is Moses. He comes down from the mountain and here are all these rules. Don't murder, don't steal, don't bear false witness, don't commit adultery, don't do this. They hated his guts. And he wrote in his book, Moses and Monotheism, that the Jews killed Moses. The Hebrews in the desert killed Moses. And then there was such overwhelming guilt that they had what's called a reaction formation. Right? Just a turnaround. Right? And they became, right? Oh, Moses is wonderful, Moses is magnificent. The laws that were sent by Moses are the perfect laws, etc. Although Judaism goes out of its way not to make too big a deal out of Moses. Moses is sort of the, for instance, in the Passover thing about the liberation for me, the Passover story, the Haggadah, which it tells it, Moses is only mentioned in passing once. It was God who took us out. But even so, he says, then there became this reaction formation about loving this religion, loving what Moses told them, and staying attached to that religion through thick and thin no matter what happened. Okay, so everything is kind of a sickness. Let me give you another example. Right? It's a defense mechanism. Let's say that I have this overwhelming urge to rip and cut flesh. Right? I want to go and stab people. Jack the Ripper, right? He would pick up these prostitutes, take a knife and slice them. Okay, now I've got to find a way to divert that activity. It's not transference, it's, I can't remember the word, it'll come. Onto something healthy. So what could I become? What could I do to make it healthy?
A butcher?
Push it down.
A butcher?
A butcher. A butcher, that's right. Take this meat. But what if it has to be human flesh? I have to cut human flesh. What's a socially acceptable way to do that?
A doctor?
Push it down, yeah.
Surgeon?
A surgeon. Become a surgeon. So surgeons are people, are Jack the Rippers who have good enough defense mechanisms in place to turn this need to cut human flesh into something positive. Again, defense mechanisms. That's how Freud sees the world. And these things are very, very, very important because they hold us together, so to speak. Now, I've had 2 back operations. The second time I went, and the surgeon said, I did the same surgeon, he fixed me up the first time, he said, he must have been in his 50s. He said, I'm not doing it anymore. He said, I'll do the analysis, etc. He says, but I'm tired of doing the cutting. And I said, are you okay? You know, I thought maybe he had a tremble or something. He said, nah, I'm fine. I'm just tired of it. So I don't know what happened to that need of his. Sometimes it's, But I have to tell you, it's, and people will tell you that people get into businesses, into professions, occupations, based upon these needs, based upon these underlying principles. There are many surgeons who are kind people, but I'll tell you my surgical story. The second time, right, I go in. The surgeon comes. The surgeon told me the first time you were in the bottom 5% of seriousness. The second back operation, you were in the top 5% of seriousness. I go there. I said, "Oh, I'm in pain. My leg, was jabbing on my nerves. The leg is in pain." The guy said, "Well, what do you expect? What do you expect?" He said, "You could have been crippled. I saved you from being permanently paralyzed from the waist down." I went and asked a couple MD buddies of mine. They said, "He's right." When I told them what the diagnosis was, he said, "He's right." He said, right? They all agreed. 3 of them I asked, they all agreed. So I said, well, I hurt. He said, well, that's to be expected. And then I asked the partner who done the first operation, he said, he's right. What do you want? So I said to him, can I go to physical therapy? He said, oh, you want to go to physical therapy? He said, all right, I'll send you. I said, okay, where do you want to go? Where are you going to send me? He said, I don't know, where do you want to go? I said, what did I know? So Southwest Memorial Hospital, I think it's a different name now. Now it's Memorial, Southwest Memorial. That day was Southwest Memorial Hospital. I said, well, it's near my house. He said, okay, I'll send you there. I go there. I come in. The first thing the physical therapist comes, she says, I said, you want me to do something? No. First we have to heat up your back so you're not in pain. Let's slide down. And she brings in 2 physical therapists in training and 2 physical therapy assistants. And she goes over my back and they look. And oh, look at this. Oh, look, he has this old thing here. She saw the old operation. Oh, look at, okay? So they have this exercise where I lie on my back and I take one foot and I bend it like this. I put it over the other one. And I grimaced a little. I heard, oh, Mr. Lieberman, don't do that. Ooh, are you in pain? Don't do that. Just put it next to it for a while. Ooh, be careful. Ooh. Each up for an hour. I can't. Then they gave me practice to go home. I came back the next time. He remembered. They must have hundreds of people in there. Comes over, there's a physical therapist. He said, don't put your leg over. I don't want you to be here. I said, no, I practice at home. It doesn't hurt. He said, are you sure? Are you sure? I go out. No, 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 no. Ice down your back. Oh, you have to be good. Ooh, ooh. Oh, are you okay? Ooh, does this hurt? Ooh. Oh, we have a shower in there. Here, take some towels. He gives me a stack of towels. It's all right. Ooh, B, it's okay. It was wonderful. They just loved over me. Different kind of personality. I went to the doctor. I said, I want another 6 weeks. He said, okay, I don't care. So I called him up. They said, we can't. You're all healed. Right? And I was weak. And the reason I went back to him is I was stumbling. When I'd step off a curb and I'd stumble, I had weakness in the leg. Right? So I go there and the physical therapist says, well, let's try leg pushing exercise. We'll go to 5 pounds. 5 pounds. I'm pushing 5 pounds. Then 5.5. Then 6. Finally, she got to 7.5. I said, let me use 20 pounds. Will you please? Let's get on with this. She said, let's see how strong that leg is. It was as strong as the other one. Slowly, carefully, sweetly. No pain. We'll get there. Don't worry. And then they noticed my posture was no good. So the last couple of days after the leg got better, you know, they had me sitting on a ball, bouncing up and down, so my posture got better. That didn't work too well. But, you know, anything just to love all over you. I went back to the physician a few months later. I could feel, you know, they stapled me up. Anybody have an operation where you've been stapled instead of sewn? Stapled, and he's pull out the staples. Of course, I'm on my stomach, but I could just feel the joint, right? And then he says to me, then he tests my leg. He said, oh boy, he said, this is a good job. The leg was weak after that. He said, it's really strong. He said, this is the kind of outcome we hope for. I'm not a violent person, but I wanted to smack him one. It's because of physical therapist that I made you send me to, not because of you. So fine. And then he tests my, you know, this kick reflex. It was gone. So he said to me, he said, you don't have a kick reflex anymore, just a little bit. So you don't have, you know, when they hit you on the knee and your leg goes like this, it was gone. I said, well, can I do anything to get it back? He said, nah. He said, what do you care? He said, you never have to do that. So I'm just telling you that, so if you get a new doctor, and you don't kick, you won't think there's, you know, that the doctor won't think, oh my God, there's something wrong with him. Tell the new doctor that it's from a previous operation. I mean, he just knows. Anyway, that's an anecdote, and there are many, many fine, kind, wonderful surgeons. But Freud would tell you that's personality driving you toward a profession. The need to cut versus the need to heal, etc., etc. The need to nurture. So those are the kinds of. And I have to tell you that when women began first going into medicine, most of them were family practitioners. This idea of nurturing and loving. Obstetricians, gynecologists. To this day, they dominate it. I mean, that's the dominant field that women go into. Taking care of the budding young, nurturing. It's quite the opposite. People are trying to get women to get into other fields of medicine. So, okay, so it's all the suppression of sicknesses. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Erickson said that is not true. That is not true, right? People have positive, healthy attitudes toward other people. It's not, a person who's a surgeon who saved me from becoming, by the way, if I hadn't had the operation, there's no question that sooner or later I would have been paralyzed from the waist down, right? There's a kindness to that, to say, I want to go into the neurosurgeon, want to do things, and he, you know, and neurosurgeons, basically, he said that, you know, this was a no-brainer for him. Neurosurgeons are in your brain, they're on your spine. Mine were all below my spine, right? He said, this is not, you know, there's a kindness to that, a decency to that, a desire to help, as much as the desire is there to help for the physical therapists. People are butchers, are giving people food, right? So that's the first thing. There is such a thing as a healthy personality. We're not all of us are not all repressed illnesses, which is basically what Freud says. The second thing is, once again, like Piaget, there is a definite sense in Erickson that we are not all simply creatures of our cultures. that there are certain things that make us all human, and all humans are the same in certain ways. Now, it's going to be true that culture is going to have very different effects on people. So no one is going. So in a culture where there are no people selling stuff with infomercials on TV, culture doesn't have television. It's not going. A person's not going to become mistrusting by being fooled by a TV infomercial. Anybody ever been fooled by one? So, because they don't have them, but you can be fooled by someone else. I got one of those steamers. I'm getting on the infomercial, and they said, well, here's the steamer, and then, well, they're shipping and handling. You want the carrying case? That's another $15. I said to my wife, what about that? She said, hang up. I said, something smells here. So I hung up, and she said, I'm going to go. She jumps in the car, goes down to Walgreens. There was the whole thing for $5 less than the steamer, never with a carrying case with everything, than just the steamer was. Okay? So if you don't have so there are different things in different cultures that will make you trusting or mistrusting. At each stage, you're going to see the culture is going to influence what is going to happen to you. But basically, a healthy personality, which we'll see at the end of Erickson, a healthy personality is the same in all cultures. It's a trusting, hopeful, loving kind of a person. And you can see radical multiculturalism doesn't like this too much. Okay? Now, Erickson said, hey, you better get my picture out of there for a second. Erickson stages are sequential, but they're not hierarchical. We'll talk about that some more. Okay? Hierarchical, Piaget stages, come back to me for a second. Piaget stages are hierarchical. It means you've got to get one right before you go to the next one. We talked about that about Freud too, right? Erickson's going to say the same thing that Freud did. I'm going to show you a hierarchy. When we get to Maslow, we're going to summarize it for a third time, and I'll have some slides about it. Okay? So in other words, you're going to keep going whether you get a positive resolution or not. So if there's a person who has a real mistrusting resolution, it doesn't matter. You're going to go to the next stage. However, let's go back to the PowerPoint if we could. However, because each new stage emerges according to a predetermined biological span, irrespective of how successful the resolution of the previous stage was. However, the unhealthy resolution of a stage negatively affects the resolution of all subsequent stages. Okay? Let me give you an example. Come back to me for a second. At one stage, there's the ability to form positive relationships with other people, loving relationships with other people. Okay? That's at a higher stage. Well, that's going to be awfully hard to do if you don't trust anybody. Okay? That's going to be awfully hard to do. There's one stage in which you feel that you're gaining the skills necessary to function in society. And then a later stage in which you feel you're making a positive contribution to society. Well, if you feel that what you're doing, that you don't have any abilities whatsoever, it's going to be awfully hard to feel that you're making a positive contribution to society. Do you understand what I'm saying? So a negative resolution of any given stage negatively affects all the rest. So if you screw up a kid at one stage, the screw-ups are big time. They can keep going and going. And the higher you go, the more tippy it is. It's sort of like this. Let's see what's going on here. Some people say it's like this. You get a good resolution, then you get another good resolution. Then you get a resolution that's a little bit off. It's not so good. Well, that influences the other one, and it's off even more. And then you get one that's... And then the next resolution, the whole personality topples over. You see, you can't get a straight building. Some people draw it like this, right? Here's a good one. This one's not so good, and there's a crack. And therefore, everything above this is going to be full of cracks, and you have a wobbly building. It's just, you see what I'm saying here? Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint, if I can get to it. Okay, so here are Erickson stages. Okay, you got it? Okay, let's keep going. I'm just kidding. There they are summarized on slide 7. Let's go take a look now. Okay? The first 5 stages have a parallel in Freud stages. At least initially they did. They still do, but Erickson came to the idea of healthy resolutions right? And obviously that made him very different from Freud. These 3 stages are the adult stages that he added. You cannot imagine the overwhelming contribution that he made by just telling us there is such a thing as adult development. Interesting enough, Maslow hinted at it, but this is really much more clearly put out. People who are all of a sudden, this midlife crisis, this I got to have a job, I got to make a contribution, I can't take it anymore. My kid is going away. What am I going to do? Okay? People who are married for years, then they get divorced and they're lost because their identity was being in Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. Now there isn't a Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. All right. Let's take a look at these, the comparison. What I would really like to do is have a chart that went out like this, a long chart, and we could compare Freud and Erickson, stage and age and all that stuff. But I can't do it on this, so you're just going to have to stick with me. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. Here are Freud's stages: oral, anal, Oedipal, latency, and genital. And here are Erickson's comparative stages: trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, initiative versus guilt, industry versus inferiority, identity versus role confusion. So what he's going to say is for each one of these stages, there is a parallel stage that has to do with the role of the child in his or her social world. Okay? And then he has his 3 adult stages, which I might as well put here, which are intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, or self-absorption, he sometimes calls it, and integrity versus despair. Here are the ages of the stages. So you can see trust versus mistrust parallels the ages of the oral stage. Autonomy versus shame parallels the stages of the anal stage. Initiative versus guilt parallels the stage of Freud, the ages of Freud's Oedipal stage, right? Same age as Freud's anal stage, same age as Freud's oral stage, same age as Freud's Oedipal stage, same age as Freud's latency stage, same age as Freud's genital stage. And then he has the 3 adult stages, the early adulthood. He would probably revise this in the mid-20s into the third, perhaps into even the 30s, adulthood, and finally old age. Okay? Okay, come back to me for a second. So let's talk about these stages one at a time. By the way, you're not going to be able to get this from the slides. The slides, I don't have a description of each stage. Let's go to the first stage of trust versus mistrust. Let's go back to the PowerPoint for 1 second. Sorry. He says the most important person, the most significant relation, take my picture out for 1 second. Thank you. He's going to talk about the significant social relations you have, because remember, this is a psychosocial theory, is the maternal person. Okay, now you can come back to me. Okay, so he's going to say, in trust versus mistrust, it's the maternal person, you say the mother, or maternal persons, it can be the mother and father, who nurture you. And from this we get oral satisfaction, not oral satisfaction according to Freud. But Erickson says, wait a minute. You're completely helpless here. You can't do anything. You're not trying to do anything. Rather, here's what bothers you. I'm hungry. That's the most important thing. And I'm uncomfortable. Right? I need my diaper changed. Or I'm hot or I'm cold. And either the environment takes care of you, feeds you when you need to be fed, right? It's mostly around feeding, and takes care of your physical needs, changes your diaper when you're cold. I mean, kids don't care if their diapers are messy, but infants, but if they're cold or if whatever, then you basically become a trusting person. If not, you become a mistrusting person. This world is not to be trusted. What I need, I can't get. Okay? And this is how Erickson is going to explain mental illness. by saying that people, it's at the extreme end of a positive, of a negative resolution. So I'll give you an example. We have a word, almost all of you know it, for people who trust absolutely nobody and nothing. Everyone's out to get them. No, not a university student. What's the word we use?
Paranoid.
Paranoia. Or, what were you going to say?
Sociopath.
A sociopath. It depends what kind of sociopath, though. Right? Sociopath usually is the next stage. We'll get paranoia. He says the extreme form of mistrust is paranoia. That's the extreme form of a negative resolution. But you have it in less extreme forms too. People, all of you know people. All of you have come into situations where you realize the basic thing to do is to be suspicious, right? Like when you're a teacher, some administrators have certain kinds of code words, which means I got to talk to you and it's nothing good, right? So, or if you've ever had a boss, right? But there are some people who walk into every situation suspicious. They're suspicious of people. They're not sure. What's in it for you? Why do you want to be my friend? Is there something in it for you? We're going to see Cobra yet again. We'll have a different explanation for this. But there are people who go through just not trusting. You've all run into them, huh? I hope nobody here is one of them, but you can't tell. But you've run into them. I just don't trust you. Now, if people, there are, again, Erickson says, if you learn from bitter experience, people are not to be trusted, then you have to function that way. Okay? So for instance, anybody been in the military? Yeah? The first time they asked you to volunteer, did you go in as an officer?
No, I enlisted.
Push it down, right?
I enlisted.
No, you enlisted. Good for you. Remember the first time they asked for volunteers, you were chipper and lovely, and said, oh, maybe I'll volunteer, right? No?
The first time they asked me to volunteer is when I joined. That was the last time I volunteered for anything.
Very soon, if you're in the military and you're, like I was, a private, right? You go in as a private, you learn, don't volunteer for anything, right? You're a fool, okay? You're right to be mistrustful, because anybody who volunteers, right? What do they ask for volunteers for? They can order you. It's got to be something either miserable, and they can come back to you and say, well, you volunteered, or dangerous. All right, go ahead.
The basic rule of thumb was never be first and never be last.
Never be first, never be last. And we had another one, try as hard as you can not to let the duty sergeant know your name, right? Because at the last minute, you know darn well what's going to happen. Who's going to be in KP? Who's going to be this? Of course, he waits till 3 minutes before the roster's due, and he just starts to scribble down names of people he knows, right? One in that platoon and two in that platoon. Yeah, unfortunately, the duty sergeant learned my name. I must have had KP so many times in basic training I wanted to throw up, right? So that's, and by the way, that's true of all armies. So you got to be very careful, okay? Because, you know, you learned. But he had basically a trusting nature. He enlisted. Good for you. Thank you. Okay? So he's giving me a wry smile, like, you know. So but basically people basically going with mistrust. Or if somebody makes a mistake and you said you did it on purpose, I know you were out to get me. There are a lot of people like that. And by the way, you'll have mistrust in kids. You'll find that a lot. They don't trust authority. They don't trust people in authority, and because their parents weren't good to them, and they just don't want to. And okay, and that can and that's very difficult. It's very difficult to deal with people like that. Now the second stage, let's go back to the PowerPoint. Whoops, I hit the wrong button. Which parallels Freud's anal state, which is toilet training. The parental persons, the people who are having you toilet train, are the ones who are the significant other. Okay, come back to me for a second. Okay, now, at this point, wait, I got to see something here. Okay, good. At this point, okay, Freud points out a couple of things are happening. I mean, Erickson points out a couple of things are happening. Number one, wait, let me just, I changed the slides when I was piddling. Number one, okay, he says the whole concept of shame comes in here, particularly genital shame. This is part Freud and part Erickson, because the child stands up. This is where you learn to stand up and walk, and all of a sudden your genitals are exposed. Okay? Not only that, so that can be shame, but this is also a time when you're learning, remember Freud said to control your bodily functions? Well, you're also learning to control, says Erickson, social things. I probably shouldn't say this, but my son called me up and he says, well, now I know Max, that's my grandson. Now I know he's environmentally, that he's more developed than regular kids. He's ahead on the developmental curve. I said, how do you know? He said, at the time that I make this tape, it was just a couple of weeks ago, he said he's 21 months old and he's already entered the terrible twos. Okay, he was kidding me, right? This is the terrible twos. No, 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 no. Who has kids? You remember this? Also, me do it, me do it. No, me do it. He had a 2-hour fight with him about putting on his socks. Me do it. Or if you have a short name, sometimes he says, Max do it. Kids wouldn't know, right? He takes the sock and he puts it on his big toe. That's all he can do. He's 21 months old, for God's sake. Right? So finally my son made a deal with him. Then my son takes off, puts it on. No! Take it off. Me do it. Well, finally, sound familiar to anybody? Oh my God. So finally, they made a deal. You do it first, I'll do it second. So my grandson puts on the big toe, and then he can't take it off. He takes it off, all hell breaks loose. He has to sort of pull it from the big toe onto the rest, right? I remember my oldest son, we go in there, and he's in the car, 2 years old, right? And he's here, I'm going to stand up. He's getting out of the car. He's getting out of the car. You got me? There we go. And he's standing in the doorway, right? Because he's little. And he goes like this to get out, and I grabbed him, right? He's going to fall on his face. He looks at me. His first name's Avi. He goes, Avi, do it. Goes, scrambles back in the car. So I said, wait, 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 because he's right over the sidewalk. So I backed up onto the grass. I said, you do it. So he comes out, he gets like this, and he sees me, and he goes, get away. He saw that I was close enough to catch him, right? And he goes like this, and he gets on the ground, and he didn't fall. And he gives me cups and smiles with a smile like this. I told you. And then I went to pick him up. No. He's walking into the house himself, right? No, 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 no. Okay? I'm trying everything. I want to be autonomous. And these are the things that other people do by themselves. There we go. I want to turn on the light myself. I want to plug the thing in myself. Got a 21-month-old. I wouldn't let the kid plug the stuff into the socket herself or himself. I would say no. I want to cross the street myself. I think I'd say no, right? Okay? That everyone else is doing. I want to do it. Okay? Now you can shame people. Back to the Freudian roots by saying, oh, you messed up, you're a bad girl, bad boy. You made a mess, you made a mess, you made a mess. I have to tell you, by the way, this is another area in which this earlier the better comes in. It's very difficult to toilet train a boy before 2 years old. Right? Somehow it's a medal of honor for a kid to be toilet trained early. I don't know why. I told you about my Aunt Ruth, didn't I? My Aunt Ruth comes, and my son, the son who's got his own grandson now, he says, he realized that we want him to be toilet trained, and he decided no. So he even had a little, he had a little pencil that was like his banner. And he'd run around with a pencil, diaper, diaper, gimme, diaper. So my aunt saw this, and she said, and this went on for a few months, right? He was over too, and she said, oh my goodness, not toilet trained yet? She came to visit. I said, no. She said, well, you know, Gil, that's my cousin Gil, a year older than I'm her son, he was toilet trained when he was 10 months old. Believe me, no boy is toilet trained, no human baby. So I said to her, Aunt Ruth, I promise by the time he's 27 he'll be toilet trained. You know, what's the difference, you know? By the way, I'll tell you how he did get toilet trained. He heard me making arrangements for him to go to preschool. The next year he would have been 3, right? So he comes and he's standing by the phone. He's got a fistful of pencils. I don't know where he found them. He says, school, school, going school, school, going school. He was very verbal, very good with language. So I said, so I hung up the phone. I said, gee, I'm not sure. He said, why? I said, you have to be toilet trained to go to school. It took 2 days, just like that. The day after the next, he was toilet trained. I might add, by the way, that was the last good thing he ever had to say about school. He hated school from the minute he got in there. I called him up in college. I said, how's college? He says, everything's great except the classes. Oh, I'm in the pep band, and oh, I'm the lighting guy for the play, and oh, the classes. So, what can I tell you? Okay, he said this also has to do with social kinds of things, not just toilet training, that you're bad because you saw it, right? Oh, you can't do that right, you can't do this right, don't do it, you'll break it. Chastising kids for trying things and getting them wrong, right? Now, obviously, at some point, you have to stop. You're not old enough to cross the street by yourself. You can't plug stuff into the electric socket. You're too young. Right? I'm not going to let you do it yourself. And once again, the resolution, ultimately, and there are certain things that we have to know about autonomy versus shame. Okay? But that's deep, right? People with Parkinson's disease or other kinds of physically debilitating things, they struggle as hard as they can not to give up the ability to do day-to-day tasks. But those who are mentally healthy ultimately admit, I can't do it for myself anymore. You're going to have to help me. Right? There are certain tasks that other people do that from the beginning. I can't park a car. That's all I can tell you. I wrote my friend back, I said, how's Houston? I said, the best thing is you never have to parallel park. Right? There's plenty of parking everywhere. I cannot parallel park. To this day, I must bang into the curb. Okay, I admit it to you. I've only had to get 2 new tires for banging into the curb in front of my house. Bang! Tire's gone. Only 2. But I've hit the curb 50 times, right? I can't do it, so I know. So if there's tight parking, I get out and let my wife do it. She's got a spot on the window, or if we're going to someplace we have to parallel park, so let's take your car, you do it. I can't do it. Okay, so I probably could learn somehow. I passed my driving test somehow, but at some point you have to learn what you can and cannot do. So there has to be a little bit of a resolution. But ultimately, the watchword here is no, 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 me do it, me do it, me do it. Okay? The next state, okay, and by the way, people who have an unhealthy resolution, they're full of shame. They're full of, I'm not sure I can think of a mental disease, identifiable mental disease. I'm no good. Nothing that I do is right. I can't do it. I'll tell you one story, and I'm not sure if this is autonomy versus shame or initiative versus guilt. I had a friend, I'm going to give you the quote, who was a very good piano player. I had 2 friends who were musicians in high school. One was a piano player, and one ultimately was a composing major, and he became a composer. I haven't been years, but he had a lot of his stuff published. He was a good musician. And he told me the other one, I can use his first name, it won't matter. He said, Henry is a very good piano player. He's really good. I used to go over his house and listen to him play piano for me. He was really good. He told me one day, his father said to him, Henry, everything you touch turns to shit. That's a quote. My father died. Right? So he died, so we were buddies in high school, so this is 30 years? 35 years after high school? So my father dies, and I go back to Rochester where I grew up. You know, we had all left. I go back to Rochester where I grew up, and I'm going to the synagogue, right, to say the prayer for the dead. And some guy calls out to me because I hadn't seen him in 35 years, and I took a look. I said, "Oh my God, it's Henry. How you doing?" And we can tell him the story of his life. Well, he tried the music, and that didn't work out. And he's been married a couple times, and neither one of those worked out. And then he went to Israel for a while, and he got a job there, and that didn't work out. And this didn't work out. Now he's back in Rochester, right? Now he's back in Rochester, and he's looking for a job, and he's living with his mother. His father had passed away. Nothing to it. He just couldn't get his life together. And I have to tell you, the synagogue where I went, this was a rabbi who had known my father. But it was a synagogue, and that's why my aunt, my father's sister, who had been arranging this, said, "I want him to do it." This synagogue was basically, it was one of these places, it was just dilapidated, deteriorated, falling apart, right? And the only reason it was there so that this rabbi could have a job until he, right? In other words, the community was basically supporting it so that this rabbi could have a job until he, you know, he decided to retire or passed away. He was well into his 70s. Even the synagogue he came back and joined was one that was almost gone, right? And he was looking for a place where he could fit and do something. And by the way, he was by far the youngest person there. There was nobody there younger than 70, right? It was just, there was just something like he just couldn't make his way in the world. So it's a little funny what his father told him, but you have to wonder if that's how he grew up. And he never, so it's painful. Anyway, let's see if we can get one more stage in here. The next stage is initiative versus guilt, okay? And this parallels Freud's Oedipal stage, or Oedipal/Electra stage, in which, remember, guilt was the thing here. Remember, shame, did we talk about the difference between shame and guilt? What's the difference between shame and guilt? Somebody tell me. This is an important distinction so you'll get the idea. Where does shame come from? Go ahead. Tell us your name once more for the 19th time.
Rosanna.
Rosanna.
Shame is something that others make you feel, and guilt is something that you make yourself.
Very good. Shame is in front of others. Okay? Guilt is internal. Many people say guilt is internalized shame. How'd you know that?
Just the definitions of the word.
Very good, very good. Not from a sociology course? They talk about shame-based societies and guilt-verse society. Okay, Rosanna, very good. I actually knew your name. I just had to keep the joke going. Okay? So after 9 times, I get it, and that was the number 11 for you. Okay? So Rosanna got it. That's exactly right. What Rosanna said is exactly right. So you see, shame is the ability to do things in society that of which others approve, right? And you can't do them. You feel like you're a worthless person. You can't handle the tasks of daily life. Guilt comes from internal kinds of ideas. Taking your own initiative to try new things and feeling they're okay versus guilt. Remember, here is where your ego is, your superego is developing. Here's where your ego ideal is developing. Here is where your ability to go out in the world and do things, right, becomes very important, and your ability to understand the world. So come back to me. The watchword of this stage is why. Why? Those of your parents, you remember it. I have one parent here. She's saying, "Oh yeah, I remember that." Why? Matter of fact, Mahalia Jackson, no, she's a famous smoke. She had a song, "Why, oh why, oh why? Why don't fish marry elephants? Why, oh why, oh why?" It goes on and on. It's a very cute children's song. And she caught kids exactly. Why? Until you want to, right? And this is where do babies come from? Where is this? You go to this whole thing about sex, and then somebody says, from the hospital, "Oh, okay," right? It's try to give kids, try to explain, how am I going to explain to the kid where babies come from? The hospital, "Oh, okay." I want to know the world. I want to I want to go out. I want to find things out. Now it's my own initiative. It's not the tasks the general tasks are doing. Right? I want to try things out. This is the place where you're building things. This is the thing where kids go into. That's why kindergarten, about drilling, in nursery school and kindergarten, drilling letters is the wrong thing to do. This is a place where kids should be playing with blocks and building things and trying things out and doing things. In the article that I assigned, you'll notice about Eleanor Duckworth or the interview with Piaget, right? Where she lobs him a softball. She says, what theories, how is your theory different from others? You would expect me to take a pot shot at Skinner, but no, it's Montessori. It's because she's so close to him. And in Montessori, she said, remember he gives the example of the sticks, from the smallest to the longest, and you have to arrange them that way, because Montessori schools are very developmental, but he wants to, tell the Montessori people, no, let the kid arrange the sticks the way she wants to arrange them. Let her make the design she wants to arrange. Let her take initiative. That's what 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds are supposed to be doing. That's what kindergarten means. It's a German means. It means a children's garden. They're supposed to be playing with things, looking at things, doing things, exploring the world. You notice how close this is to Piaget in many ways, because people looked and saw children, okay? They need to be trying to build things and make their own things. I remember when my oldest son was in Israel. He was born in Israel. He was there until he was about 3, and toward the very end, they had a thing they called glue-togethers. And almost everything in Israel at that time came in wood cardboard boxes. And the kids would glue them together and make shapes. It was just fun. They could glue and they could get shapes. And so I go to pick him up, and he takes his box and he puts it on his head. Of course, he was speaking Hebrew. Puts it on his head and he says, "Hat." Right? So the teacher says, "No, Avi, is that really a hat?" I said, "Avi, if you want it to be a hat, it can be a hat." Right? I said it to him in English so he wouldn't understand, right? So I said, because, come on. He's exploring. He's trying to figure things out. Okay? If you don't do this, you get wrapped in guilt. Wrapped in guilt. If people don't let you take initiative, if everything you do, this may be where Henry's father's comment comes from. It's hard to know without exploring, talking to Henry more. Obviously, I couldn't. He was my friend. And I'm not a therapist, but this kind of thing of and extreme guilt, right? Extreme guilt. We have people, many neo-Freudians who basically owe a lot to Erickson, will tell you guilt is the worst emotion you can have. Now, Freud is not telling you that. Right? Rosanna, let me see that necklace. Ooh, it's a nice one. I'm already plotting how I can mug her and take it. I should feel guilty about that. There are things about which you should feel guilty. Right? You ever out late at night by yourself?
No.
Okay. Good. Okay. So, tell me where you live, right? I should feel guilty about that. I should feel guilty about that. If I do steal it, I should even feel more guilty. Right? It's unnecessary guilt. Right? You'll notice, by the way, that an initiative versus guilt, let's go back to powerful for 1 second. Again, it's the basic family. Saying, and that's that your place in the family fits. The way you move about, the way you do things, the way you fit in, the things you try are accepted. It doesn't have to be the older brother's way or the younger brother's way. All of us have had those experiences one way or the other, right? Come back to me for a second. My brother calls me up and said it finally happened. My brother was a pretty good, obedient, behaving student. I never handed him my homework. I was a lousy student. Calls me up, and I'm 5 years older than he is. Calls me up. I was in college. He's in high school. He said, "It finally happened." I said, what he said? Somebody said, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" I said, "What could it possibly be?" They say, he didn't understand something he didn't ask. He said, "Why didn't you ask like your brother was always shooting off his big mouth, right? Asking questions. Even when he didn't do his homework, he'd ask us questions, right?" So, he doesn't have to be like his brother. He has to be himself. What he does and the way he functions in the world has to be okay. I'm not going to ask for raising your hand. How many people here have had a parent make a totally unreasonable request from you? You say no, and then afterwards you feel guilty. Yeah, everybody? Right? No? Or you do something nice for your parent, the parent says, "I appreciate it," and afterward you feel a little guilty that you didn't do more. Yeah? Who has never had an experience where your head said you shouldn't feel guilty, but you felt guilty anyway. We all have those experiences, right? You don't have those? Good for you. You're lucky. You're a very mentally healthy person. Right? No, it's true. Okay. And smart too. You're not alone at night. Okay? So these are, it's important to remember that this is a stage in which children need to be able to say, I'm going to try things and see how they come out, and to say it's good that you tried. Things are good. If you're going to be preschool teachers, you should let kids do that. And if they get the wrong answer, who cares? And remember, Piaget is going to tell you they're not going to have a very easy time getting the right answer, because they're pre-operational at this stage, the large majority of them. Okay, next time we'll go on and we'll talk about what happens in the school years, early school years and the high school years. You'll see how vitally and crucially, overwhelmingly important is the role of the teacher in contributing to children's mental health, and how disastrous it can be when a teacher does not contribute to kids' mental health. Okay, see you next time.